Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you for signing in. Thank you for waiting, audiences. I would like to introduce the two speakers we have today, Chun Hao and Amardeep, in our third fireside chat. Firstly, we have our host today, Mr. Cheah Chun. He is a chartered accountant by profession with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting and Finance. He is also a fellow member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, FCCA, and the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, MIA, with over 15 years of experience. Secondly, I would like to introduce our special guest today, Amardeep Singh from Lee Hishamuddin Allen and Gledhill. He specializes in both litigation and advisory matters on all aspects of employment and industrial relations law. Amardeep is a member of Bar Council's Industrial and Employment Law Committee. He is recognized as a rising star on the Legal 500 Asia Pacific 2020 and 2021 rankings. So, if you all would like to ask a question, please type in the chat box below, and we'll go through them later on. For now, I would like to pass the mic to our host, Chun Hao. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Over to you, Chun Hao.
Thank you, Isabel. It's really a good day to be in this webinar this afternoon. Now, the topic for today is how to navigate employment matters in Malaysia. It is Amardeep's area of expertise. For people who are not familiar, can you share more about what you do?
Sure. Thank you very much, Chun Hao, and also Isabel, for having me here today, and also for that lovely introduction. Now, before I answer the question on what do I do for a living or the kind of work that I handle, I think I think it's very important for me to firstly explain employment law in Malaysia, right? So, unlike Singapore, Malaysia is not a hire and fire country. So, in Malaysia, you cannot dismiss an employee at will. I know every employer will then say that we have the termination clause in our contract which says we can give 2 months notice and terminate the services of our employees. While exercising your right under that provision makes the dismissal lawful, in other words, you have not breached the contract, it does not necessarily make the dismissal equitable. The difference is this. Uh, in Malaysia, we have what you call the Industrial Relations Act. And the Industrial Relations Act states this, that if you dismiss an employee, you must have just cause and excuse. And just cause and excuse is the bane of existence of every HR practitioner. If you're a HR practitioner, you know straight away the moment I tell you just cause and excuse. So what is just cause and excuse? Just cause and excuse, it's your Form 3 exam, PMR, poor performance, misconduct, or redundancy. Poor performance is where an employee is incompetent, is unable to do his job. Misconduct is where an employee conducts himself in a manner that's inappropriate. And redundancy is in a position where the employee's position is no longer required, which is very relevant to today's times. So if an employee is dismissed or he feels that he has been dismissed without just cause and excuse, he can then take the matter up to the Industrial Relations Department. The Industrial Relations Department then try to see whether they can try to get the employee and the employee here to settle the case. If they can't, the matter is then escalated to court, the industrial court. At the industrial court, if the court finds an employer has dismissed his employee without just cause and excuse, the employer can be liable to monetary compensation, which is 24 months plus 1 month for every year of service. That can be quite a lot. So imagine you've got an employee that's worked with you for 26 years. Over times, due to the pandemic, you now need to retrench your employee. And this employee has worked with you for 26 years. Now, if the court finds this dismissal to be without just cause and excuse, you could be liable to 50 months' salary. That's quite a lot, almost 4 years. So my main area of practice covers that, industrial relations law. What I do is I assist employers, strictly only employers. I don't work with employees. I assist employers in managing industrial relations and employee relations, both in litigation and also advisory. When it comes to litigation, what I do is I defend employers in the industrial court right up to the federal court in unjust dismissal claims. So, for example, if an employee is dismissed, he's unhappy, he goes to the Industrial Relations Department, the matter is subsequently escalated to the industrial court. I represent the employer at the industrial court. Let's say the court finds either ways. The matter is then escalated to the High Court. I also then represent the employer at the High Court, Court of Appeal, or Federal Court. My advisory work is also tied to industrial relations. What I do is I advise employers with the view of trying to mitigate or minimize litigation. For example, if you have a managing director that has conducted himself in a manner that's inappropriate, and you're now looking to take disciplinary action against the employee, I will then assist you or guide you from A to Z. Okay? Or if you're, for example, looking to, because of the pandemic, carry out a retrenchment exercise, I assist from right down from cost-cutting measures or trying to avert retrenchment, right until you carry out a retrenchment exercise. Of course, that has been, that example that I use has been very relevant to recent times and what I've been doing. So, for example, in recent times, one of the hot topics has been restructuring and retrenchment exercises, also advising on salary cuts. And now lately, with the vaccination being undertaken in Malaysia, also mandatory, whether you can introduce mandatory vaccination policies. Employers are starting to face these problems where you only have a group of employees. 99% of your officers are vaccinated except that 1%. What can you do? Can you stop this employee from entering the office? So I help you craft policies. The second area which I do also is employment law. So the earlier what I spoke about was industrial relations law. I also do work on employment law and the contractual relationship between an employer and an employee. Another thing that in Malaysia people don't know is our Employment Act, right? Our Employment Act in Malaysia does not actually apply to all employees. It only applies to a select group of employees. And this group is employees earning below 2,000 or employees that are carrying out manual labor, right? So as you can see, it will not apply to many different employees in different sectors. So then what are you governed by? So if you don't fall within the Employment Act and you sign a contract, an employment contract with your employer, which states that you are not entitled to annual leave, you are not entitled to medical leave, that is your terms and conditions of employment. You cannot then fall back to the Employment Act because it doesn't apply to you. So that is where I also come in. I work with employers to work on, for example, the employment relationship, which might be your employment contract, might be your policies, might be a confidentiality agreement, might be a non-disclosure agreement. Besides that, a part of my portfolio is also immigration law and management of foreign workers. Here, for example, if an employee is, there is a raid by the immigration department, and they have taken or they have detained a certain number of employees, we then assist the employers So that's my area of practice.
Right. Thank you, Amardeep. I believe at this moment, at this point of time, you must be very busy because I've seen a lot of comments in Facebook related to this matter, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So now we are in the recovery
It's
phase.
become a very prevalent.
Yep, that's right. At the moment, we are in the recovery phase with some of the states in phase 4, and we are allowed to have interstate travel. But in terms of work, some employers are now offering the option to work from home because it is more economical for both employers and employees. Do you think that this trend is here to stay in the future?
Yeah. So my personal opinion, yeah, I think it's very likely it's here to stay, and I also think it should. For example, I think PwC just recently announced that it's going to be having its employees work from home on perpetuity. And let me share my personal experience of working from home. My personal experience during the first MCO was this. I had cloud storage, OneDrive installed on my computer for a while now. But during the first MCO, March 2020, at that point, I just never chose to use it. Simply because I was not comfortable using such software, and I lived 5 minutes away from home. So every time I needed to work, I would just drive to work, get my work done, come back. If I need to go back in the evenings, I'll just do that again. But when the first MCO was announced, that's how unprepared I was. Right? When the first MCO was announced, I had to email myself all my unfinished work. I had to download all my work on a thumb drive, and I also had to take a briefcase of files back home. Right, so that was the first MCO. So it goes without saying, it was very, very difficult for me to work during the first MCO because a lot of the documents which I required, a lot of the references and templates that I use were all stuck in Office, and I couldn't access them. Then, after the first MCO, I spoke to someone and I told them how difficult it was. And obviously, someone in the automation industry like yourself, they told me that how, silly I was, right? How silly I was, and how I could so easily have my work computer be mirrored on my personal laptop itself by using cloud storage. And they taught me how to do it, and it was so simple. And when it came to the the third MCO, when it was announced, the only thing I did was shut down my computer and came home. I didn't carry a single file. I didn't do anything. It was so easy to work from home that it's so easy nowadays to work from home that there are weeks when the entire week it goes by with me forgetting how to work, with me forgetting to actually go to office. And I have to remind myself on a Thursday that I haven't gone to office this week, and I think I should just go and check in. Right? I think the pre-pandemic misconception that we all had was work from home meant slumber, right? A day off or a light day, something us as employers, are guilty of. And to be honest, I was a believer of that too. I had a very old school mindset that, if you want to work, it should be in office. If you want to take a day off or you want to take a day break, you should take your annual leave. There's no in between, right? But the pandemic has shown me otherwise. It's shown me that efficiency and productivity can be sustained, or even in certain cases can be improved by working from home. And it does have its benefits as well. It gives this sense of flexibility to your employees. It comes off as a benefit, right? Or a perk that my employer now allows me to work from home. If I have something on, for example, a plumber that needs to come in, I don't have to apply for annual leave like what I used to. My plumber can come in, he can work, I can work from home, no issue at all. There's also no wastage of time. I mean, I'm one that should not be speaking about this because I work 5 minutes away from home. But there are others that travel almost 1 hour. They had to take LRT, MRTs as well. So for them, it's become more productive as well. And my personal experience is this. Chunao, you'll not believe this, that I used to go to court for what we call case management. Case management is just to update court on the status of the case. And usually case management is done within 2 minutes. It's actually in a room. Most of the time, we are even not with judges. It's just in a room. We'll update an interpreter or a registrar, and it's done in 2 minutes. But I had to drive to Putrajaya for 45 minutes. I had to drive back from Putrajaya for 45 minutes. That's 1.5 hours. I had to wait in Putrajaya for 1 to 1.5 hours. So now we're already up to 3.5 hours, and then for a 2-minute job. So you used to take me 3 hours and 32 minutes to get a job done that was actually just 2 minutes long. And now with this whole work from home, even the courts have gone to e-review. So what we do is I chat with court. So for example, today morning I had a case management. All I had to do was log on to my laptop, inform court what I needed to inform, merely by chatting with court. And it was done within 10 minutes. I didn't have to move from my place. I didn't have to drive 1.5 hours. So a lot of time has been saved. It also improved, obviously, then efficiency and productivity. A lot of time I can use for other things. And it has its potential, obviously, health benefits and preferences, especially for parents. But I think, personally, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I don't think you can say that it applies to every industry and every company can do it. For example, if you were to ask me, in the legal industry, I think it's going to be very hard to move to a full work-from-home setting. Lawyers, end of the day, need their workspace. They have their files. As much as we try to digitalize things, we still need our documents. We still need to run through our bundles. So it'll be very hard for us to hot desk. We also need our library. We also need to go to office to access our library. A lot of the work and the research that we do use it's from books, right? And we cannot run away from that. And I also think that the junior lawyers, right, our pupils, for example, they are missing out from the guidance they get from their seniors, that day-to-day interaction where they can just drop in and ask for some guidance. I think they will also miss out from that. So, and in fact, when I spoke to my colleagues, right, when I spoke to my junior colleagues and I asked them what they think about this work from home environment, they told me the same thing. They said that life became a bit of a loop. You wake up in the morning, you shower, you have your coffee, you work, you have your dinner, you sleep, you restart. They really missed that human interaction. So I think for the legal industry, if I'm going to sum it all, I think a more hybrid arrangement is more practical. So again, I think this applies to other industries as well. Not all of them can go completely remote, and some of them may need to have a hybrid, and some of them actually just may need to work from offices. Thanks.
Wow. To update a 3 minute on the case, you managed to save between 1 to 2 hours of driving. That's pretty awesome. That's a big change, isn't it?
Yeah, and Shunav, I may just add very quickly there as well. So besides just time, also cost is saved. Because obviously, as you would know as an auditor as well, when you travel, you charge the expenses to your client,
Yep.
right? So all those expenses are saved.
Yep, I totally agree with it. So for some of the companies who want to implement work from home, what are some of the main issues that should be considered if they were to draft a work from home policy? For example, should employees get their full entitlement to their salary while undergoing their mandatory quarantine?
Okay, I will take that. I think there's two questions there. So I'll take the latter question first. It's simpler to deal with. Can you, are employees entitled to their full salary if they're undergoing mandatory quarantine, right? Um, so we have this common law principle in Malaysia called constructive dismissal. So constructive dismissal is when an employer breaches a fundamental term of an employment contract. So some fundamental terms I can give you is like a demotion, um, reduced salary, unpaid leave. Even though I give you an example, or even duties and responsibilities. I'm a lawyer, and I do my job scope is carry out litigation advisory work. Tomorrow, my office informs me that I'm no longer required to carry out these duties, and what I'm required to do is carry out photostating, right? Dispatch work. Now my duties have changed. My salary is the same, no problem there. But that is nonetheless a fundamental term, right? My duties and responsibilities was a fundamental term. Similarly, here your salary is a fundamental term. An employee's salary is a fundamental term. And any breach of a fundamental term, including salary, can expose an employer to a claim of constructive dismissal. So, firstly, those employees that do contract COVID-19, for example, they are anyhow entitled to paid MC and hospitalization. In fact, even if they are on paid leave, now they can claim SOCSO, right? Unpaid leave, they can claim SOCSO, sorry. Secondly, those that are close contact and are required to quarantine, these people are healthy and they can actually carry on working from home. So if they can work from home, again, there is no reason to deduct their salary. They are again entitled to complete salary. For daily wage earners, that means those that need to come to office to work, there was a guidelines that was issued by the Labour Department somewhere in somewhere in October last year, March and then in May last year, where it expressly stated that employees in quarantine are entitled to their full salary. The guidelines also prohibited employers from placing employees on quarantine on unpaid leave, right? So I think that's what you need to bear in mind before you place your employees on unpaid leave. So put it simply, no, you can't. You can't put them on unpaid leave or deduct their salary. Now, the second question. The second question is, what are the main issues that you have to consider when drafting a work from home policy, right? Since employees are working from home. I think the first thing we have to consider is what are the issues that we will likely face if employees work from home. I think the most important and the one that probably has one of the biggest risks is the risk of unintentional disclosure of confidential information. These are employees that now take documents home, or for example, me, let's say I take a contract home of an M&A between two companies, I leave it on my table. And a friend comes over, he sees it, and he's like, "Oh, wow, nice, good opportunity for me to make some money on the stock market," right? So that's confidential information being disclosed, unintentionally or intentionally, doesn't matter. The next is disciplinary concerns, like what I told you previously. Um, we always had this misconception that if someone is working from home, it's a slumber day, right? they're just
Yeah.
they're not going to be doing anything. But you
Mm.
know what? The reality is there are employees who are like that, right? They are employees that will sign in, they will play with their mouse. You have seen memes where the people have put it over a fan just to keep the mouse active. There are people who do that. All right. The other one is working erratic hours. Employees working at night, for example, when work hours are 8 to 5, they are working from 5 to 9,
Mm.
or being uncontactable during working hours. Um, the others are more of performance based, lack of guidance for your junior staff, performance management, blurred work home boundaries leading to burnout. This is mainly caused most of the time by employers itself, calling your employees late at night, calling your employees after work hours, calling your employees or asking them to do work over weekends. And then this, of course, leads to mental health issues, right? So a work from home policy should address all these concerns. And very quickly, I can think of, like, for example, if you're going through a health and safety, right? Some concerns that you would want is, as an employer, you have an obligation to ensure under OSHA, Occupational Safety Act, that your welfare of your employee is cared for, right? You provide a safe working environment to them. Now, you have taken them out of that environment and you have placed them to work from home. But that doesn't mean your obligation ends there, right? That doesn't mean your obligation ends there. It's a responsible employer. You want to ensure that your obligation carries on. So this is where, for example, hours of work. Your employees may be facing for mental health purposes. You may want to include some sort of guidance to superiors, right? When, how you can contact them. Can you ask your employees to do work over weekends? How, what circumstances? If tools and equipment are being used at home, right? Is there something that you should inform your employees on how it should be used safely? Perhaps even get a checklist, right? If you were to face any injuries, if you're working from home, while working, you were to get, let's say a stroke, right? You can claim SOXO, right? You can claim SOXO. However, there are strict reporting obligations. You can also claim from your insurance provider, but again, there are strict reporting obligations. So you must have details of how do these employees need to report and when they need to do so. Um, Also, you may want to address vaccination requirement if they're working from home. If they do choose to come to office, can they do so? Do they need to be vaccinated? Do they need to take a test before entering the office? Are there any special requirements that they need to do so? They need to do before entering the office. The other concern, obviously, would then be management of performance. Again, employees generally, naturally, naturally will you will have a group of employees that performances will dip when working from home. You need to be able to motivate these employees. So you need to be able to track their performance and accountability. For example, be it attendance. Now it's so simple. You could just set a Microsoft Teams meet on Mondays at 9:30 just to catch up with everyone. What are you going to be doing? Um, you need to inform them that they need to be contactable during working hours. Data security and confidentiality breaches also need to be addressed. This goes more with conduct. For example, if documents are being taken, if I were to take a contract from my office, how do I need to handle it? Do I need to put it in lock and key? So, there must be very clear policies on that. Also, I think this is more relevant to tech companies is, can you use your company laptop to connect to public internet, right? Can you go to Starbucks and work? Is there a threat? Is there a cybersecurity threat? Can you allow family members? And Chun Hao, this is an actual story. I know an employee was dismissed because his the mother allowed the son to use the laptop, and the son decided to be a bit cheeky and go and on some inappropriate websites, right?
Mm.
And unfortunately, the the company looked at it and said that no, we can't condone this, and they dismissed the mother, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think for that, one of the solution is just buy a new laptop for the son.
You're right. You're right. So in that case,
Right?
yeah, in that case, what happened was it was during the MCO,
Mm,
and the son's laptop crashed, and he asked the mom, "Can I use your laptop?"
mm,
That's what happened. So it was a single incident, and they traced it. It was only a single incident, um, and in fact, wait, if I recall now, the mom was not dismissed. They took disciplinary action against her, and she issued a final warning. They wanted to dismiss her, but what
mm.
happened was they discovered later on that there was only one instance that this took place, and she was able to explain. So they warned her, "Don't do it again." But had it been over a prolonged period, there might have been a different outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So let's say the productivity levels of these remote employees suddenly to reduce to extreme, and some of it is uncontactable. So what measures can the employers take to manage their performance?
Okay, so I think when it comes to management of employees, the most extreme thing is the most extreme outcome is dismissal, right? It's always dismissal. May have in between um, warnings, demotion, increment being held back, bonuses being held back. So the courts have, through its jurisprudence, developed the test that must be satisfied in the event you dismiss an employee. And I think employers should use the same test at all times, because that's the most extreme. If you can satisfy the most extreme, um, in the event you do choose to demote the employee or take some other step, you're covered. So the test before the industrial court when it comes to managing poor performance is threefold, three questions. The first thing is the employee must be warned about his poor performance. And the reason why is it serves two purposes. First is he is warned that if he does not improve, the employer may dismiss him. Number two is so that the employee is aware that he's performing poorly, right? Number the second test then is you must give this employee sufficient opportunity to improve. Now that he's been informed he's performing poorly, you must now give him sufficient time and set a reasonable target for him to improve. For example, let's take a timeliness, right? You've got an employee that is supposed to deliver reports every Monday by 5 p.m. However, this guy delivers it every Wednesday at 5 p.m. So he's out late 48 hours. So that's just an issue of timeliness. Now, to to improve when it comes to timeliness, it's a rather simple thing. Do it on time, right? So a short time frame to improve is fair. But let's use something else. Let's say it's language, right? This person's report is atrocious, right? Riddled with grammatical errors and things like that. Now, it's not fair to then inform this employee that I expect you to improve your language from speaking good to speaking well within 1 week, right? Or within 2 months. You must give him a fair chance. Possibly, you may need to also send him for some sort of training or Toastmasters or something along those lines for him to improve. Now, same thing for sales, right? You cannot expect someone whose sales performance is not doing too well. You tell the employee that, okay, fine, I give you 1 month to increase your sales from 30% to 70%, right? It's just not, it's not reasonable. And, an example case that I can think of was actually just that. Was this employee worked for a car company. He was not hitting his sales targets. The company gave him 3 months to increase his sales targets. He didn't. He couldn't do so. And the company thereafter dismissed him. And the court said, no, it's unfair. You cannot expect this employee to improve. On top of that, this employee was transferred from one location to the other. Maybe it will take him some time to get used to it. And now the third test is, of course, is having warned the employee, having given him a fair chance, this employee still has not improved. So whether you work from home or whether you work from the office, the same tests will apply. you would still need to satisfy the court when it comes to this test. So one best example, I mean, best mechanism an employer can apply when managing poor performance is always a performance improvement plan. Performance improvement plan is something very simple. It's just a set of guidelines by an employer provided to an employee, which tells him what, how, and when he needs to improve. So, for example, this is the area you need to improve. How you need to improve it is you need to improve your sales from 30% to 70%. When do you need to improve? You need to improve it over the period of 6 months. And I will monitor you every month. So, in other words, today you're 30, tomorrow, by the first month, I expect you to be 37%. By the second month, I expect you to be 45%, and then it goes up, right? And you have frequent meetings with this employee. So technology has made it so simple that you can actually have these performance meetings by Zoom or by Microsoft Teams. Back then you had to call this employee in, you have to sit down with him, but now it's so simple that you can just have back and forth, even on a weekly basis.
About these warnings to the employees, must it be written black and white or is verbal warning accepted?
No, my advice is whatever you do, everything must always be written, right? Regardless, it should always be written, because the moment it goes to court, every employee will have amnesia. They will not remember that you have warned them. Yeah, they will be the first to deny that they were warned.
Mhm. Okay. So, in the wake of further disruptions that could happen from further outbreaks, touch wood, hopefully it doesn't happen, it can cause more financial difficulties for many companies or employers, leading to retrenchment exercises. So, what should the employers know before doing so?
Okay, I think the first one is you must ensure, obviously, whatever you're doing, if you're carrying out a retrenchment exercise, is the redundancy is genuine, right? It must not be for an ulterior motive. I know employers that will use redundancy to remove one employee, right? Simply because they don't want to go through poor performance, they don't want to go through misconduct. They're like, yeah, it's fine, we will just eliminate the position and just go down the path that his role was redundant. So the most important, it must be genuine, right? And the second test is the retrenchment exercise subsequently must be in accordance to best practices. So let's go to the first question. The first question is it must be genuine. What the court will do is the court will not just take, for example, my company, we've got 3 employment partners, right? And they tell me tomorrow that we only need 2, right? And one is eliminated. The court will not just take your word for it. The court will look at it and say, why was only 2 required? Was there a reduction in the work that was coming in, right? Therefore, it necessitated the removal of one person. So, for example, if you're talking about a case of a reduction in sales, right? Sales has reduced over the period, maybe during the pandemic. The court will want to look at your sales report. They will not just take your word for it. And this is an example of a case that I did somewhere last year. What happened was the company told me they carried out a retrenchment exercise because sales had declined during the MCO period, right? And sales was not doing so well and things like that. So I said, okay, fine. Can I see your reports? And they gave me the reports. And you'll be surprised. You know what? May 2020 was their best recording for 1 year, right? Best sales record for the last 1 year. It beat even January, February 2020. And January, February, March, April put together still wasn't May 2020. And I looked at them and I told them, what decline in sales? The moment I show this to court, the court is just going to say that, look at it, fine, your April and your March was close to 0, but your May was so well, right? Your June was fine, your July was fine. The next, of course, is financial reasons, cash flow problems. Again, you must be able to show from your reports. The court will not just take your word for it, or if there's been an elimination of role, you must show how these duties has been distributed. So that's the first question on the genuineness of the exercise. But you must also carry it out in accordance with best practices. So what best practices is, in Malaysia, we have this thing called the Code of Conduct for Industrial Harmony. While it's not legally binding, it's the court will inquire into any departure from it. And a certain parts, it's covered certain areas on best practices. One of it obviously being early warning. You should not just call an employee in on the day and tell him that your role is eliminated. You should sit down, you should consult the employee. For example, if you need to make a certain amount of savings, if you call the employee in and you call 10 employees in and you tell them that, we need to make a certain amount of savings, and you make the offer of what if I, instead of retrenching one employee, I carry out a salary cut for 10 employees, right? So that's why they want a more consultative approach. They don't want more of a dictatorship. The other one is termination benefits. Common misconception is if you are retrenched, you are entitled to termination benefits. That's wrong. That's not the case. It only applies for employees under the Employment Act, which is employees below 2,000 and employees carrying out certain work like manual labor or drivers. Employees earning more than 2,000, you are not entitled to termination benefits unless your employment contract says so or your company policy says so, which is very unlikely. So, in such a scenario, the courts have developed a principle that in cases of retrenchment where the employee is retrenched maybe because of an elimination of a role, or maybe because the company's projection is sales will reduce in the coming years, and it's not because the company has no money, or in cases where the company has got a holding company overseas or even locally. Where possible, the courts have said, where possible, do make payment of retrenchment benefits because it's a safety net. It comes off as a safety net for employees that are dismissed, not because of their fault, it's because of the fault of the employer or the situation around them. This is different from a case of poor performance or misconduct. This is a case where the employee didn't do anything. He's unfortunate that his role is redundant. You can also consider best practices is outplacement services, for reskilling, upskilling, and things like that. And one thing I think employers always raise is the last in first out principle, right? Yes, the last in first out principle should also be complied with. The court will inquire into why was there a departure from it. You can depart. The best example I always give people is if you have a very senior employee who has been working for you for 20 years, but his performance is average or below average, but you have an employee that's worked with you for 1 year or 2 years, but his performance is above average, it will not make sense to keep the senior employee, right? It will make sense to keep the junior employee. Same thing here. So the court will inquire into the departure.
Right, that's very enlightening to know all this information. So, what can employers do to mitigate the risk of retrenchment, such as salary cuts, and what should they know before doing so?
Yeah, you're right. Salary cuts is one of them. You have also unpaid leave. You also have reduced working hours. Thinking on top of my head, you also have a reduction of overtime, hiring freeze, freezing increments and bonuses and things like that. But I just want to touch on salary cut because that's a very common thing now. A lot of people in the last 1 year have been faced, especially if you're in the aviation industry, face up to 60 to 70% salary cuts. Now, salary cuts or even unpaid leave cannot be carried out unilaterally. Of course, if the employee agrees to it, no risk. But if the employee does not agree to it, then there is a risk of constructive dismissal. So that was like something that I was saying earlier, where there's a fundamental breach of your term and condition of employment. So in this case, again, it's salary. Salary is a fundamental term, and if it's reduced unilaterally, it can expose you to a claim for constructive dismissal. And if there is a claim of constructive dismissal, the court will then inquire whether, number one, was there a fundamental breach? And number two, if there was a fundamental breach, was there just cause and excuse? So in such a situation where I'm the employer, I have no choice but to take some sort of cost-cutting measures, right? And obviously, the most extreme is retrenchment. I have to retrench my employees. The court will evaluate the financial standing of the company. The court will consider that, okay, this is a company that knew looking at its finances, it had to carry out cost-cutting measures. It had no choice. Now, instead of going right to retrenchment, what the company decided to do was to carry out other cost-cutting measures. Maybe uh, reducing work hours, maybe freezing increments and bonuses, putting in the hiring freeze, reducing overtime pay. All that didn't work. The company then had to take the next measure, a bit more extreme, which is a salary cut. And the employees walked out claiming constructive dismissal. Now, as a responsible employer, what else could you have done? Because if you didn't implement the salary cut, the only next step is they lose their job completely, right? So in this case, then the court will balance it and say that, you know what, yeah, fine. It looks like it was a genuine, it was for genuine purposes. While there is a fundamental breach, it is for just cause and excuse because it's an alternative to retrenchment. And I remember this case that I read that a company implemented a salary cut. Subsequently, the employees claimed constructive dismissal. The case went to court, and the court, in holding that the company did not have just cause and excuse, or it was unfair, the court took into account that the directors bought themselves Mercedeses during that time, right? So brand new cars were rolling in at the same time while you're implementing a salary cut. But had that not been done, the case could have been different.
Right. Wow. Okay. Buying cars during a salary cut is a no-no. Definitely don't do it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I have one last question. One of the biggest fears among employees is losing out on opportunities and being replaced due to business automation and digitalization. So how can employers and HR managers minimize the impact on both employers and employees, and what can employees do to stay relevant?
Yeah. I think automation will definitely have a significant impact for employees. I don't think it's a current issue. I think it's an ongoing issue that's been going on for years. Simple things that required the human element or human touch can now be done by the computers. Just going back to the legal industry, research back then required us to go to books. If you want to find a case, we had to go to the index, find from the index, go to the respective cases, read it, spend hours, countless of hours doing it. Now we can do it on our search engines, right? Simply just typing in some keywords and it's brought up to us. So I think the demand for manual skills has reduced and will continue to reduce over time, right? And what employers should consider doing is always upskilling and reskilling the affected employees. You should not jump straight into retrenchment. Where possible, try to save the employment of your employees. And the courts will take this into account. The court will look at it and say, fine, this guy was an executive in HR that had to key in employees' annual leave um, on a daily basis, right? Fine, the company got a software finally, and it can be now done online, and everything can be done online. The court will not simply because of that state that, you know what, yeah, fine, it's fair to retrench these employees. What the court will look at it and say that this is quite a junior employee, right? He's an executive in HR. Can't he be moved to finance, right? Couldn't he be moved to, for example, admin? So again, where it's possible, transfer them to other departments or roles as well. Retrenchment should only be considered as the final option.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In my line of work, I've met a lot of people who resist change, especially in adopting technology. So if let's say some of the employees say, oh no, I'm not going to learn this technology. I'm not going to go use Google Cloud. I'm not going to adopt any cloud that you mentioned. Is it the last resort will be retrenchment, or is there any other way as well?
No, I mean, if an employee does not want to help themselves, so, if you offer the employee the chance to transfer from one department to the other, he does not, and you have the right to do so, that's insubordination. It will not even be retrenchment anymore. It'll just be insubordination, it'll be misconduct, and you dismiss the employee. But of course, you can go down the path that you offer this employee the chance to be transferred to another department, or take a package and be retrenched. Some employees may say, you know what, I'm fine. I think I can just go to another company and get the same HR role. Not too difficult for me. I'm very young. I can maybe even do Grab on the side. I would rather take the retrenchment benefits. Then yeah, retrenchment.
All right, good to know. Finally, how can viewers contact you if they have more questions, Amardeep?
You can, yes, of course, feel free to contact me. You can contact me by my email. It's ast@lh-ag.com. I will put it under the public chat. Or you can call me 016-4727-554, or you can just contact Chun Hao or Isabel, and they will connect you to me.
Sure, sure. We'll be happy to do that. And before we take questions from the audience, I would like to pass it back to Isabel to share more about the special grant we have for SME owners from the government. Over to you, Isabel.
Thank you, Chun Hao, and thank you, Amardeep, for your insightful sharing. Okay, let me just show this in stream. The Selangor government is providing a 50% matching grant of up to 5,000 ringgit per company for the subscription of the cloud payroll, Amplex, cloud accounting, QuickBooks Online, and cloud ERP system Oracle NetSuite. We will drop the link in the comments. So please take this opportunity as the grant is valid only until the end of this month. So I'm gonna just attach the link here in the comment section. If any one of you interested to know more about this grant, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can find us on www.highpinestc.com or email us info@highpinestc.com or send us a WhatsApp. Okay. Okay, so I saw some question here from Kenny. Let me just bring this up. So Kenny is asking if my company decided to reduce the working hours and reduce employee salary, will this against the law?
Okay, I'll take that. Well, I'll very generally answer this question because I might be in a position of conflict if I answer that question, and you know that that company happens to be my client. But generally, like what I said earlier, you can, if an employee agrees to a reduction of working hours or reduction in salary, then it's fine. There's no issue there. If an employee does not agree to the reduction, it does not automatically make it against the law. The court will then look into it and say that why was this done? Was it fair? Because if the alternative of that reduction of salary or the reduction of working hours is retrenchment, the courts could look at it and say that, you know what, this is very fair. Instead of making the employee lose 100% of his salary, what the company did was make him lose 50%, right? Cost him to lose 50% of it. And over time, if situation improves, things will be restored to 100%. But if you retrench an employee straight away, then you're jumping the gun. Yeah, so it doesn't make it automatically against the law.
I hope this answer your question, Kenny. Thank you for asking the question. Yeah. So for audiences, if you're still watching this video, please feel free to drop in your question here, and when we still have Amardeep with us during this Facebook Live.
While it's still free.
Yeah.
Yep.
Virtually.
Lawyer fee, legal fee is not cheap. So better take this opportunity.
Thank you, Kenny. Okay. Yep. So thank you, Chun Hao and Amardeep. We are so grateful to you for sharing your expertise. Thank you, audiences, for staying with us. If you have any question, please put in the comment section below for Amardeep. Please leave a comment below. Do remember to like and share this video. Until next time, my name is Isabel. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks, Amardeep. Thanks, Isabel. Bye.
Thanks.